Growing up, I was, and still am, a bit paranoid. Maybe because I got it from my mother. She'd always been a complete paranoid and a real security freak. It's funny to imagine, if she had the time to lay landmines outside our house, she'd do it. So there would come a time I would ask her why she is, and also me, so protective and vigilant on everything. That was last month, and what follows here is her answer, in the form of a true story of what she had experienced in Baguio City, Philippines. My mum had been working for a small firm back then, and for context, I was the only child at the time and was living with my grandparents, which was in Pangasinan, south of Baguio. She would visit me from time to time. My uncle, a sergeant for the Philippines military back then, was stationed in Baguio City and was living with his family. My mother, being a stubborn and independent woman, insisted on renting an apartment when my uncle offered her to live with his family. She didn't accept the offer and told my uncle that her apartment was just an hour commute away from her workplace. In the Philippines, we have various ways of commuting, from buses to jeeps or motorcycles or tricycles. This time, my mum's ride home was a white service van. Yeah, I know, that kind of van. Well, back in the mid-90s, there had been reports of a white van abducting women in the night, and authorities would find their bodies afterwards, naked and battered, almost to the point of being unrecognizable. To be clear, white vans are pretty common here as service vehicles. They're either used as public or private transport. And besides, she said to me that she was with her co-worker, a small petite woman with the eyes of a sweet innocent puppy. Without a thought, my mum was protective of her. It was a Friday evening, she remembered. No rain, no clouds, just clear skies. After 5 days of overtime, severe headaches and caffeine withdrawal, both my mother and her co-worker were obviously tired. The two of them entered the van with their soft bed in mind. When my mum noticed that they were the first passengers, she thought, oh good, I could rest my eyes a little. You see, public transport in my country doesn't run on schedules. They usually run on the number of seats occupied depending on the size of the vehicle. You have to wait until it is completely full before it will depart. After a few minutes had passed, my mother felt the van door slide open, and in goes your 5 guys. She held onto her purse tightly, paranoid, and these men seated themselves at the back. Mind you, this is a public transport vehicle, so usually it has 4 rows of seats to accommodate 12 to 14 passengers. My mother and her co-worker had chosen the row closest to the driver, which was the first row, and they were close enough to the door handle. And so when the van door is shut and the 5th guy found his seat, the van suddenly went eerie quiet, quieter than before, until the front passenger door swings open, and in goes your 6th guy. And as if on cue, the driver started the engine and slowly rolls out the makeshift terminal, which was just a sidewalk, with only 8 passengers. My mum remembered thinking, that's odd, they must be in a hurry. The commute towards the first tollgate plaza was awfully quiet. Not one of the 5 guys in the back spoke a word. By this time, my mother's getting a bad vibe from these creeps. That was punctuated when she noticed that the driver kept glancing at her, especially at her baby-faced co-worker, through the rearview mirror. And with that, she also felt burrowing on the back of her neck. This made her quickly turn around and look at the back seats, and what she saw made her hands and feet go limp. There were 10 hungry eyes attached to expressionless faces. So later, she confessed to me at the time that she had no inkling of an idea what to do next. She went blank, trapped in a moving van on a dark highway, with nothing but tall trees and cliffs waiting to swallow you down its dark and inky blackness. By this time, my mother's co-worker was softly snoring, so she nudged her and whispered to her that they were in trouble. This girl was still half awake, so she'd only understand half of what my mother had said. My mother then has to repeat herself, using much more detailed words regarding their situation, and on what could happen afterwards. This had woken her up, better than any capablanca that she drank back in the office. Believing my mum completely, she glanced outside and whispered back that they will be crossing another toll gate. Maybe they could request the driver to let them out and use one of the restrooms there. My mother glanced back at the driver. He was all jittery and looked like a kid waiting to open a present. He was tapping on the steering wheel and kept shifting from his driver's seat while maintaining his quick glances at both of them. This made her think that asking would be useless. After a few minutes of hearing him tapping, my mother squinted at the bright lights of the second tollgate. She hurriedly whispered to her co-worker, "We're getting out once the van stops." The van stopped, and without delay, she forcefully slid open the door, dragging her co-worker by her hand. She remembered a hand almost reaching out to them, and one of the creeps gasping and cussing at the same time. Both of them hurried off to one of the security guard stations there. When they were both just a few feet away from the confused security guard, they both heard the driver's side door open, and out go the driver, walking briskly towards them. My mother and her co-worker both scream at the guard for help, and at the same time the driver, like a blue-balled barking dog, growled at them to get back in the van. The guard, knowing only half the situation, instinctively threw himself between the two young women and the driver. My mum yelled back, but the driver yelled louder, screaming at them to get back in the van. The guard, still confused at the situation, just stood there, not knowing how to react. The co-worker, shocked, white as a ghost and frozen still, stood there like a mannequin. The driver noticed this and reached a hand to take her. That made my mother furious. She raised her purse to try and smack this creep senseless, but now the guard was realizing the full situation and pushed the driver away. About this time, she noticed that the 6 guys on the van were just sitting there, not looking or stepping outside to check on the altercation. Most Filipinos, when there are accidents or altercations, always are there to be onlookers. We even try to help resolve the situation quicker. However, their attitudes towards the situation at hand was truly unusual and suspicious, almost like they didn't want to be seen by anyone. By this time, the driver changed his tactics and just asked my mum to pay up, so she threw a couple of hundred at him. Then he took the money and drove off, along with the 6 creeps inside. The guard then asked my mum and her co-worker if they were alright, and she said, without any grace, "That guy's really mad, ma'am. If he isn't planning anything bad, he couldn't have just asked for the fare first and nothing else. I think that guy meant to do you wrong." With that comment, the co-worker turned even whiter and collapsed onto the ground sobbing. After hearing that, knowing my mum, she must have been really pissed and annoyed. When the shock and adrenaline had worn off, they both kicked themselves for not checking the van's license plate. This was in the 90s in the Philippines, so CCTV is out of the question. The cops later came after giving both of their statements, and my mum and her co-worker were escorted back to their apartments, finally safe, both being able to sleep on their soft beds. Now, even though my mum's paranoia would get on my nerves, I always reminded my younger sister on what happened, and that my mother had luck on that Friday night. To top it all off, in our family we have this very playful motto: better paranoid than sorry. So don't ever ignore that bad feeling in the pit of your stomach. Always double check your doors, make sure they're locked, and always look back if someone's following you. You don't ever want to be sorry. At the time, I was about 16 years old. I am a female nerd. I used to go to a comic book store in my town to play Magic the Gathering, whether it be Friday Night Magic or a random day of the week. A new friend and I were talking online and agreed to meet at the comic book store. My sister and her boyfriend at the time decided to meet at the comic book store as well, so she walked me to the store at around 4 p.m. and told me that she would return when it closed at 6:30. I sit down and wait for my friends. They meet up with me, but are only able to stay until about 5:30. So we sat and played Magic for the time they were there. While we played in one corner, there was also a group playing Pathfinder. My friends left, and I decided to just wait until my sister could come and get me. At the time, I didn't have a phone, and wouldn't have one until about a year later. I sat alone. One of the guys playing Pathfinder calls me over. "You look so lonely over there. Come sit with us. We won't bite." John calls over to me. I hate confrontation, and would hate to seem rude at the time, so I join them. I sit far enough to feel comfortable, but John scoots a little closer to me. He starts talking, and for the most part, I'm just drowning him out. All of a sudden I hear him say something along the lines of, "You know, you're really pretty. Yeah, I'm a furry, and it's so hard to find a date once in a while." I seize up and start to have a bit of an anxiety attack. I look over at the time and realize it's about time to go. They stay open until the game is over, and it's a little bit past 6:30, and my sister and her boyfriend are still not there. I felt myself begin to panic, thinking of why they aren't there, and the possibilities of being stalked or killed by this guy. I stand outside the comic book store while they lock the doors, and everyone is going their separate ways. John gets on his moped and scoots near me. "Hey, do you want to ride home? I don't think a lovely girl like you should be walking home alone." I explained that I was waiting for my sister and her boyfriend to collect me, and that we were going to hang out at her boyfriend's place. He smiles and relaxes. "Then I'll wait here for you." I feel so sick, and just want him to leave me alone, waiting for my sister. She finally shows up 15 minutes later. I look at John and let him know that they are here and that he can go. I run over to my sister and her boyfriend, look at them with scared eyes and just say, "Let's get out of here." We start walking, and John continues slowly behind us. So we get to her boyfriend's apartment and hide out. John waited outside the apartment for 2 hours. It was terrifying. We ran into him a few more times when we would go to the comic book store, and every time my stomach would churn. I told my nerd boys about him, and whenever we decided to leave, I would need one of them to walk me home. John continued to do very uncomfortable things. Things such as stabbing himself in the arm to show off his pain tolerance, and asking me about friends who were underage and if they were single, or showing us all pictures of his privates when nobody asked. Things that would make us, or anyone else, have nightmares. He continued to try and follow me home, but every time we would walk somewhere safe until he would leave, so he would never find out where I lived. We found out a month or so after these events that he moved into the same apartment building that my sister's boyfriend at the time lived in. Every time they would run into him, he would say something threatening along the lines of, "Be a shame if someone were to get hurt," or worse. Even after my sister and him broke up, he continued to threaten them until he moved out. I had moved away after graduation and had moved back home about 2 years ago. All this time hoping that I would never have to run into him again. I was working at a convenience store about half a year ago, working the graveyard shift. I was just finishing up. We had a rush of people, and there was John, even more uncomfortable than before. Feeling like I was going to vomit or sob, I ran into the back and waited until he left. I apologized to my co-worker and told him about John. I do sincerely hope that we do not meet each other again. This happened around 6 or 7 years ago. My husband and I are driving back from Michigan as we went to visit my parents, and by the time we get to the remote back area of Ohio, it's very dark. We always make sure our doors are locked, because we aren't stupid. Anyway, we make a quick stop to use the restrooms at around 1 a.m, stretch, and get something to drink. We get back on the road, and we're going along as we slow down to stop for a stop sign, and this woman walks out right in front of us, and I slam on the brakes to keep from hitting her. We sit there for a minute collecting ourselves and thinking, what the hell? She knocks on the passenger side window where my husband is sitting, and I'm telling him not to roll it down and to just let her get the hell out of here. But he, being the kind-hearted soul he is, foolishly rolls down his window. She tells us that she's been working for hours and that her car broke down. She can't get a hold of her daughter, and she has no money and needs $50 for a cab. He tells her to hold on and rolls up the window, and I'm telling him, no, you've got to be nuts. Do not let her in the truck. And he gives me the "but she needs help" speech. Hate me all you like, but I learned the hard way to never trust people, especially strangers. I told him that I didn't give a shit. Even if she were bleeding on the ground, she was not getting into my truck. But he guilts me into letting her in. Now I drive a Ford F-150, and there's only one seat, so we're all crammed in, and I ask her where she's going. She says to a store. Then she says she needs to find a cab, but she has no money, and if we can give her $50. I'm silently telling my husband, like, the hell we're giving her money as we're driving her, but he relents and says yes. We drive, and she's telling us all kinds of stories about her and her daughter. How she needs to get home to her, how she's 16 and home alone, and that it's about 2 hours away in Ohio. The more we drive, the more it changes. I ask about her daughter, and this time she's in her late 20s, has a few kids, and is in Kentucky. I said, but I thought she was 16 and home alone and 2 hours away in Ohio. And she says, oh, that's my youngest daughter. It's my adult daughter that I'm gonna see. Okay, that makes no damn sense, because she just said she came from Kentucky. We find an ATM, and thankfully it's broken. We push on to find another, and the more she talks, the weirder she gets. She tries cozying up to my husband and sweet-talking him, and he is oblivious to women hitting on him. So he moves on to me, and I refuse to accept it by constantly changing the subject. Then it gets stranger. She says, "Are you two married?" We reply, "Yeah." And she says, "Oh, that's good, because I would have had to just call Jesus down to smite you if you two were living in sin." We're both thinking, what the hell? She then says that we are a very nice Christian couple, and we both say that we aren't Christian. She gets upset by this and starts spouting the Bible at us, and the husband is resorting back to her. And the entire time, my husband and I had been communicating through signals that we need to get the nut job out the car. We pull away and he says, "I need to get out to use the ATM." And she says, "Just have your wife pull up and use it." He says, "No one but me uses my card." And she says, "Have your wife get out." And he replies, "Her door is broken. Only the passenger door works," which is of course a lie, but we need to get her out. She gets out, and he grabs the door and pulls it closed, and she grabs the door and starts screaming at us to let her back in. And she's trying to get back in, and he says to her, "No, your story's full of holes. It doesn't add up." She pulls out this knife, assuming like a switchblade, and my husband shoves her, and we peel out of the bank parking lot with the door still open. He shuts and locks it. She chases us, screaming that she was going to murder us, and I floor it, pushing the gas pedal to the floor, and we're doing 120. And I don't let up for 4 miles until my husband is screaming, "Slow down, you're gonna kill us." I do, and I'm shaking in part due to anger, and the other part because I'm freaked out. We make it home safely, but I really hope that we don't encounter another crazy woman like that again. Also, my husband learned his lesson. We now both agree to no longer pick up random strangers in the middle of the night, or at any other time for that matter, because you never know who is out to get you. I live in a ranch-style home in the middle of Missouri, on a 1.8 acre of nothing but woods. We bought the house almost 2 years ago. The house was vacant for over 8 months before we purchased it, and the realtors had problems with squatters about 3 months into the house being for sale, but said nothing had happened since. My elderly grandmother lives with me, as I am her caregiver. It's just the two of us and our dogs, and we moved into the house in early October of 2016. The first incident occurred in March 2017. We started seeing a bunch of plastic bags and trash around the back of our house, further out than either of us go. We didn't think much of it, but did make a mental note that raccoons or something could be getting into our trash. I put some bungee cords on the cans to hold down the lids, and wrote it off at that. One night, I was coming home much later than normal, about 1:30 a.m. All of the land is fenced in, but there is one back gate. Near the back gate, I saw a bunch of trees rustling. There is a lot of wildlife in our area, so I assumed that that's what it was. But I got that horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach and decided to go check it out. The ground was dry enough that I was able to drive through the yard in my car with the doors locked. I shone my headlight on the trees, and a man came running out of them. If it wasn't terrifying enough, he ran straight for the gate, as if he knew exactly where it was, opened it, and left. I was absolutely terrified, so I called my father, who lives in the area. He explained to me how the large population of homeless people is in our area, and that he'd be over the next day to put a lock on the gate. About 2 weeks after the first incident, I was letting my dogs outside. One had already gone inside, and the other was playing hard to get as usual. I began calling out her name. It wasn't even dark yet. And after about 3 calls, a voice, distinctly male, started calling out her name. She began barking aggressively and running for the house. I was freaked out. But again, my family talked me out of making a call to the police. I was freaked out. But again, my family talked me out of making a call to the authorities. About a month passes, and my grandmother has a habit of forgetting to close the garage door behind her. At around 11 p.m, our neighbour from across the street knocks on our door and says he was outside smoking, and he says he saw 2 men in our garage talking. He said as soon as he started walking over that they ran off. What scares me the most about this event is that they stole nothing, and there was plenty to steal. We have a brand new refrigerator, leaf blower, power tools, and my grandma leaves the keys in the car. They were just talking. This time I called the police, and they told me in the nicest way possible they couldn't do shit, and if there were another incident, to call them and not to scare the men away. The final incident happened in 2017 and happened probably 3 months after the prior one. We have a sun porch attached to the outside of the house. The door connects to the kitchen and the outside door to the deck. I don't know if I explained that right, and if anyone wants I can send a picture. But basically we left for several hours to go grocery shopping. We came home and all our deck furniture was stacked on top of each other, and the screen ripped off the sun porch door. I called the non-emergency hotline from my area, and again said, with no idea to who these people are, and they told me nothing could be done. About 2 weeks ago now, we had our white vinyl fence power washed, because the fence is quite old. A post came off from the fence, and the company that power washed the fence didn't know how to fix it. We didn't blame them, so they had no reason to. We left that post in the front yard, but up against a fence, and we came home a couple of days later, and the post was nailed back with a smiley face sticker note attached to it. This could have very easily been a kind neighbour, but I was immediately spooked. Cut to Saturday of last week. My grandmother is able to drive again, but doesn't have her own car. I'm busy working around the house, so she decides to take herself to the doctor. My grandmother leaves the house through our door connected to the garage, and I lock it behind her. It never dawns on me to check to make sure she had closed it, and about 20 minutes after she leaves, someone starts heavily banging on the door. When I say banging, I mean it sounded like the SWAT team was assembled and they were putting all their force into banging on the door. My dogs are going nuts, and I don't know what to think. I start to think maybe my grandma left something and is trying to get my attention. But the little voice in the back of my head stops me and tells me that there's no way that little old lady is banging on a door like that. Suddenly it stops, and I hear a deep and distinct male voice laugh. I grab the baseball bat out of my bedroom and lock myself into the bathroom with the dogs. I realize I'd left my phone outside the bathroom, but I was too afraid to go out and get it. I took the lid off the tank in the toilet, so I now had 2 weapons, and nothing happened until my grandma got home. So that's the story. I know there wasn't some big confrontational climax, but I fear this isn't over yet. I don't know how or if any of these events are connected at all, but I think in my head that they are, and it's driving me nuts, to a point where I'm afraid to be alone in my own home. The only reason I even spoke about the fence is because there hasn't been a single sketchy thing happening in all of 2018. And then someone fixes the fence, and less than a week later I receive another spooky encounter? I honestly don't know what to think. I just hope that I don't have to ever see or hear those people again. This takes place in San Miguel, where my boyfriend's parents currently live. I used to visit him there and stay the weekend. On this night, we were just getting out of a late movie. It was around midnight or 1 a.m. So we drive to his parents' house and park. Now I will try to describe the scene the best I can. His parents live in a nice trailer park. The parking space faces a wooden fence, and beyond that is just an empty field, all very dark, as the whole parking lot is only illuminated by lights of the house and around there. So any time we get to his parents' house, we usually just park and get right out and walk inside. But this time, we stayed in the car, and he was telling me about a weird nightmare he had. As I was facing him and listening to him, I see out of the corner of my eye that someone is just walking through the opening in the wooden fence in front of us. He startled me, so I kind of laugh it off and say, "Oh shit, he came out of nowhere." Well, this man appears to be just walking in front of the car, so I direct my attention to my boyfriend again. But I see him stop talking and intensely stare at, not me, but something past me. I slowly turn to my window, and the man is literally bent over, hands on knees, glaring at me, just inches away from the glass. This makes me choke on my breath. I look back at my boyfriend, asking if he knew him, but my boyfriend was glaring right back at him. I turn to look at this mysterious man again, and he is now motioning me to get out of the car. In my mind, I'm like, hell no. I'm staring at him like a rabbit in headlights, not knowing what to do. Then he starts pounding on the window with so much force that I thought it was going to shatter at any moment. My heart dropped. I could hear my boyfriend about to open his door to confront him. I yell at him to not get out of the car. I quickly reach over him and lock the doors. I look back at this lunatic, and his face is profoundly disturbing. His eyes are huge and wild. His pupils were enormous, giving him a deranged look. The most disturbing part was how low his jaw hung, and he kept moving it from side to side. At this point I'm like, yep, he's definitely on something. My boyfriend is still giving him a death glare, and I see him fuming. So he turns the car on, and this triggers the psycho to run to his side and begin yanking on the door handle. As he realizes it's locked, he starts pounding on the car and kicking at the door and its sides. My boyfriend throws it in reverse and pulls out his phone. So I'm relieved that he's not going to get out and that he's calling the police. Well, I was wrong. He starts backing out and driving away, and this psycho is following us. Then he disappears. So I hear my boyfriend talking on the phone, and it turns out to be his brother that was staying there with his parents as well. He called him so that he could bring out my boyfriend's rifle. At this point I'm freaking out. I don't want my boyfriend to go to jail for shooting someone instead of calling the cops first. His brother says okay, and so my boyfriend is turning the car around to go back to his parents' house. As we're pulling in, my boyfriend has a death glare scanning the parking lot to see if he could spot the psycho lurker. Well, his brother was waiting outside their parents' house with the damn AR-15 in his hands. My boyfriend then helps me out and rushes me inside. I come back out freaking out, and to my horror, the psycho comes out of the dark fields again, and he's right there and walking closer until he sees my boyfriend pointing the rifle at him. He screams and stops, and he yells at my boyfriend, "Right here, right here," and slaps his chest a couple of times. My boyfriend yells back, "All right then, count to 10. At this point, the guy is pounding on his own head. I gently push the top of his rifle down and say to him calmly, "Please don't do this. Your parents are elderly. Don't give them the shock. We're already home, let's just go inside." I gently start tugging him away, and his brother is also trying to convince him to come inside, as he comes in with me. As we're laying down, we're obviously unable to sleep. We're looking at the ceiling and he says very softly, "I almost killed someone today." I don't know what to say back, so I just hugged him. Fast forward to the morning. I overslept because it took us forever to fall asleep, and I wake up to him not being there. I'm confused, and I walk out the room and still can't find him. Turns out he's outside, because I can hear him talking to someone. I get out, and he's standing there talking to the psycho that attacked us last night. My blood is about to turn to ice, but they're speaking extremely calmly. I stay back and wait for them to talk. When they're all done, I see the man walk into the house next to his dad's house, and I'm like, no way, he's a neighbor? My boyfriend comes up looking very pensive and just down in the dumps. I look at him confused, asking about what happened. Then he tells me that he is the neighbor's son. They ran into each other this morning, and the man didn't remember much. So my boyfriend filled him in, trying extremely hard to stay calm. The man was shocked and apologized, saying he lost everything yesterday and resorted to drugs to feel better, or just overdose and die, whatever came first. That he also, I guess, was suffering from severe depression and anxiety attacks, and that the drugs were supposed to end it all. My boyfriend said he apologized 1,000,000 times and offered to pay the damages to the car, because he did do a lot of damage, insanely only with his kicks and punches. My boyfriend said he was lucky I stopped in, or it would have been a very different story. Later on, as I'm going to the car to grab something, the man approaches me, and I'm not gonna lie, I died a little inside thinking the worst. But no, his face was different now. His eyes were very sad. He couldn't even look me in the eyes, but all he said was, "Thank you for saving my life," and that he had a new outlook on life. This experience has stuck with me, and will be one I won't ever forget. Bonus story. I work as a customer support representative for an online marketplace. I mostly work graveyard shifts, but I guess what happened during the night a couple of days ago counts as weird to say the least. On this marketplace, users can set up shops and offer various services to other users. These services that they offer tend to be very bizarre from time to time, and some of them are scammers who offer bullcrap at high prices. That being said, we had a poor little man contact us in the middle of the night, complaining about how he was robbed of $400. It seemed like it would be an interesting ticket, so I took it and started investigating the audio that was associated with it. Turns out that our buyer purchased a satanic ritual to completely change his physical appearance. This included his height, weight, pretty much his whole face, and last but not least, his penis size. The seller told him that he would require some personal info, such as his home address, pictures, no contact info, and the buyer delivered without hesitation. The seller delivered the order, and the poor buyer accepted it, which meant that the order was now marked as complete, and the seller got his funds and deleted his account. Who wouldn't? In the end, I was able to refund the buyer, and got his refund back, but man was it a blast reading their conversation. The seller was playing him like a fiddle, and the buyer kept on eating this shit that the seller served him. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories as voted for by you. Today has been a very productive day. My wife and I think collectively between us have worked something like 16 or 18 hours. And yeah, it's been tough, but we're definitely getting there. Got some exciting stuff on the way. But anyway, yeah, we're all doing really, really well. And I know a lot of you asked for the other topics in the poll. The urban exploration stories and the alien stories. Now, I was thinking that maybe I would put those out at some point soon, just because you guys showed that poll so much love and clearly a lot of you want to watch it. I haven't launched Aliens since around this time last year, really. I remember the last time I launched it, it got really, really low views. You know, and obviously when you invest your time into finding stories and making a video, you get a bit upset seeing something perform so poorly. So it kind of put me off Aliens for a long time, but you know, if it's something that you guys want, I'm happy to try again. And hopefully more of you guys will pick it up. They are quite good and interesting stories. If you did enjoy the video, it would mean a lot if you would drop a like and leave a comment, as it goes a long, long way. Like I said before, I do post every night, so why not subscribe and hit the little bell icon to be up to date every time I post and have your nightly spooks delivered graciously into your inbox. If there's a story that you would like me to read, feel free to send it to my email, or alternatively, publish it on my Reddit. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.